Welcome back. Before the break, we talked about two big stories: the removal of former President Trump from the Colorado ballot and a new Texas immigration law empowering local police to arrest suspected undocumented migrants. And we wanted to dig even deeper into both of those stories. So joining me now to help us cut through the headlines is former federal prosecutor Neama Rahmani. Neama is the president of the West Coast Trial Lawyers. Thank you so much for being here. I want to start with Texas. You have the White House press secretary condemning the new immigration law, but she stopped short of saying if the Department of Justice would challenge the law, keeping that distance there. You've got some congressional lawmakers who are calling for it, though. If this is a showdown between state and federal government, as everybody dubs that it is, does the DOJ step into the ring on this issue?
I think they do. They have to. I mean, the Department of Justice is there to, in part, protect the federal government and enforce federal law. And here you have a clear conflict, and that's where the supremacy clause kicks in. Just because this was litigated a little more than 10 years ago doesn't mean the result will be the same, because we know that Justice Thomas and Justice Alito voted to uphold that Arizona law.
We know civil rights groups are already challenging the law. They're suing the head of the Texas Department of Public Safety, who would oversee the troopers who would be able to make these arrests. Also suing the El Paso County district attorney who may prosecute these cases. Can you shed light on this strategy and whether it holds water on this side?
The ACU has already filed, and they're arguing selective prosecution based on race and national origin. That argument may have a chance of success, but the law still hasn't been implemented yet. I think the best bet is for the Department of Justice to step in, argue that the whole area is preempted. That means even if the law doesn't necessarily conflict with federal law, and I believe it does, states can't pass laws because of preemption. The reason for that is we're going to have inconsistent applications. So, for instance, on the asylum side, if someone were to enter in Texas, they would receive very different treatment than if they entered in California, Arizona, or New Mexico.
Let's shift gears to Colorado. The state Supreme Court's majority opinion, it mentioned Justice Neil Gorsuch's opinion when he was an appellate judge about state sovereignty over its electoral processes. Does this maybe box the Supreme Court in any way, them including that language in this opinion?
I don't think so. And Gorsuch was involved in a decision where someone who was not a naturalized citizen or someone who was not born in the United States was disqualified and excluded from the presidential ballot. But I think this is the type of case that the Supreme Court has to hear, and that's what it's there for. We have very inconsistent rulings across different states, a really novel constitutional issue, and this is what the Supreme Court is meant to do. So I fully expect them to hear this appeal. And I don't think the conservative justices are going to be boxed in by any previous rulings, because there really hasn't been anything directly on point here.
I mean, it's unprecedented. I'll say if, and many would argue when, as you're saying, that this case is argued before the Supreme Court. Because it's patchwork, because this is unprecedented, there's not really a lot of precedent. Where do the justices potentially begin with this? Especially, I want to include, there's already a case arguing Trump's presidential immunity. Just with that case, there's calls for Justice Clarence Thomas to recuse himself. So you got another case involving Trump. I mean, how does this play out?
And we're going to see two very important and huge cases before the Supreme Court. That executive immunity case, Jack Smith, the special counsel, wants it fast-tracked. Of course, Trump wants that delayed because delay is his friend in the criminal prosecutions. But for this particular case, he's going to want to get before the high court right away. And he has many paths to victory, one of which is, of course, that he's never been charged, much less convicted of an insurrection. And there are judges that think this is a non-justiciable political issue. Basically, that means this is something for Congress. And of course, although Trump was impeached, he was acquitted during that Senate trial. So there's a lot of different ways that the justices can come out, and I wouldn't be surprised, given the conservative makeup of this court, that Trump prevails there.
Just one follow-up question here, because it is an argument that has been coming out in reaction and response to this Colorado decision, the fact that former President Trump has not been convicted of anything regarding overturning the 2020 election. We're still waiting to see how that all plays out, given this decision from the Supreme Court, and knowing that that conviction doesn't exist. Does that make this an easier case potentially for Trump?
It does, and this is where the lawyers and constitutional scholars, they like to nerd out, because some folks believe that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is self-executing. That means that there doesn't have to be an impeachment or there doesn't have to be a conviction. As long as there's a finding by a judge that someone engaged in insurrection, that's enough. And of course, there are conservative scholars who disagree with that and say, well, no, just because this amendment exists, there has to be some sort of factual finding, some sort of conviction, some sort of impeachment before Congress, before one can be excluded from holding federal public office.
Well, regardless of which way this goes, certainly a historic moment here with this news and how this may play out for our country and our democracy moving forward. Neama Rahmani, former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me, as always.